Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, founder and president of the Current Consulting Group, and I'm joined today by Brian Feeley, senior vice president at the Current Consulting Group. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks, Bill.
So, as many of you may know, we have an extensive series on oral fluid testing, and so this is yet another episode in our ongoing series on oral fluid testing. If you've not seen the others or you haven't seen them all, you can find them at currentconsultinggroup.com. Visit our podcast page there, and you can find links to all the podcast episodes that we've done, including the entire series on oral fluid testing with Brian Feeley. So we encourage you to follow us on all your favorite podcast platform. Like us, share, subscribe, and help us build our followership on these various platforms so that more and more people can find this great information. As I mentioned, today is yet another episode in our ongoing series on oral fluid testing. And I believe that Brian Feeley is probably the foremost expert on oral fluid testing, or at least one of the top two or three. Brian, tell us a little bit about your background in oral fluid testing.
Sure, Bill. So, I guess both from a technical standpoint and a business standpoint, I've cut my teeth on oral fluid quite a bit, but overall on drug testing and different types of methodologies, I've kind of cut my teeth on for a long time. And in this series, we are going to talk about some other methods beyond just oral fluid testing, although I think there's so much focus on it today. I spent 26 years at OraSure helping to launch oral fluid tests, both drug and alcohol tests. And prior to that, I spent quite a bit of time developing immunoassays and developing methodologies. So I spent some time in the lab. But I certainly have taken a liking and have quite a passion for oral fluid tests mainly because of the value and the benefit I see it bringing to the end users and to the marketplace. I think it's just such a powerful type of a test and technology from multiple standpoints, which we'll probably talk a little bit about here in the next couple minutes.
Yeah, and as Brian referred to markets, oral fluid testing has grown in popularity and usage in the workplace market, in criminal justice, insurance, etc. It's really growing in popularity throughout all the different markets for drug testing. And that's why you're seeing a growing number of drug testing providers now offering oral fluid testing. As you know, we do a survey every year of the drug testing industry. We release the results at the NDASA annual conference. And over the years, we've seen the percentage of drug testing providers who say they offer oral fluid testing grow from, a very small percentage to today, almost all of them. I mean, it's a very high percentage in the 75 to 85 range because it varies from year to year. But it's usually a very high percentage now that will say that they offer either lab-based or rapid oral fluid testing or both. And another term that we use a lot in the drug testing world is new and emerging technologies. And this is usually referring to alternative testing methods in addition to traditional lab-based urine testing. And so for many years, oral fluid testing was considered an emerging technology. It really hadn't caught on yet. Of course, now that DOT has endorsed it and SAMHSA has endorsed it, we're seeing a lot of companies now using it or considering using it. And as I mentioned, a lot of drug testing professionals now providing it as an option to their clients. And so in some ways, I like to say that oral fluid testing is the ultimate emerging technology because it's the first drug testing method besides urine testing that's been endorsed by the U.S. Department of Transportation. And that's a big deal. That doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen lightly. A lot of research and investigation goes into it. So for DOT to announce final regulations for lab-based oral fluid testing in 2023 was a monumental development in the drug testing world. And so in many ways, oral fluid testing truly is the ultimate emerging technology. But in this day and age where employers are looking for ways to continue doing drug testing, despite the legalization of marijuana, despite pressures put on their budgets through inflation and other things that are going on with the economy, and also very tight competitive hiring markets, employers are looking for options when it comes to drug testing. And that's why, among other reasons, oral fluid testing has grown in popularity. But there are other technologies that are emerging. And so maybe, Brian, you could kind of lead off and tell us a little bit about some other employee screening technologies that have caught your attention.
Sure, Bill. So, one of them is obviously breath testing. I think that has caught everybody's attention for THC in particular. Breath testing for alcohol has been around for many years, and really, I think was one of the reasons that when breath THC started to hit the airways and show up at some of the conferences and start to get touted out there, people became very interested. It's a from a method standpoint, it's a collection method where you breathe into a tube just like you would for breath alcohol, and you collect a sample from the lungs of your air and particulates that come up from the lungs. And what you're really looking for is that THC, that parent THC. And the thing that's of interest there is with marijuana today, many employers are wanting to look for that short window of detection. You really want to look for the thing that measures impairment, or as close as you can get to impairment, right? So I think that's been the thing that's been appealing about breath THC. And so it's still in development. It's kind of still evolving. There is the initial pitch was that there's going to be a point of care rapid format, right, where you're going to be able to breathe into this thing and you're going to be able to get a result right there on the spot, which hasn't happened yet. So it's that part's been delayed. There's been and it's not even clear that there's a feasible route to a rapid instant sort of point of collection version of that, but there's a lab-based version of it where that sample goes to a laboratory and it gets tested by LC mass spec, which is the methodology that you use to confirm a drug test, just like you would anything else that would go to a lab for confirmation testing. So that's one method. I think the jury's still out kind of on how well that's going to work. There's nothing FDA cleared on that on that test, and there's some issues, right? You're dealing with people needing to breathe into a device for a fairly long period of time, so you get issues with things like deep lung or shy lung. And you get some other issues with background air that has to be sampled. But that's a new method. I think it's always interesting to keep up with that, because I think a lot has been put into it. There's a lot of interest in it. But really the oral fluid devices out there are really the one I think where the number one focus has been when you look at where things are going from both lab and instant tests. I think the test that Buzzkill has come out with, where you can very accurately tease out that THC, that parent THC component, and you can test for it on the spot. That's a good instant test. That's an oral fluid test. There are some rapid ones, some miniaturized designs of oral fluid tests now that we saw at the Endesa this year. There's some other oral fluid tests that are coming out now that some rapid formats that might even get to SAMHSA cutoffs. I've been sort of looking at. So clearly some really good movement with oral fluid. As we know from seeing the EMED folks at conferences and working with them a little bit, they even have a proctored version of an oral fluid test using the Premier Oral Tox test. So you can, get a test to someone in their own home, and they can literally pull out a device, just like you and I are talking on this podcast. I can issue a test to you and watch you do a test with everything in front of you, 100% observed, and get that test conducted, and if need be, even get a sample sent back to a lab for confirmation testing. Can't do that with urine, can't do that with anything else. So great fit for oral fluid. I see that really as the future. And but there are other things that are really interesting. There's a lot of focus on impairment tests, right? There's the gaze test has a headgear, which has been shown at quite a few conferences, where they look at eye movement and stigma, patterns of the eye. There's smartphone and smart devices that are being looked at where you follow a pattern on a smart device. Even some now that they're using where you can use an iPhone and look at and take a test with looking at your eye reaction to movement of your eye. So a lot of things starting to focus on that impairment. Why? Well, because a lot of states are starting to build language into their state laws about, your ability to take action on an employee being tied to, you having shown that there were some signs of impairment. So, other things we had looked at a fingerprint sweat test. There's a UK company that has evolved with a test that you can put your fingers onto a device and it picks up sweat from your fingertips and it goes onto a cartridge and you stick that into a device that does a rapid format. Even hair, there's even a rapid hair test now, right? So for years, we're all familiar with laboratory-based hair testing. And now there's even a hair test that Wanfo has that I believe Omega's reselling and maybe some other folks too. But so you can do a rapid hair test, which didn't think that would be out anytime soon.
Yeah, let me just say that on the Wanfo USA hair processor and test, we did an episode of this podcast where we interviewed Jessica Graham, who works for Adult Probation and Parole in Taylor County, Texas. And she had done, I think at that time, about 1,500 tests using the Wanfo USA hair processor and test, and with some amazing stories to tell. So we would refer our audience to our website to find that episode with Jessica Graham. I think you'd find it very interesting.
Yeah, that's great. So, lots of different options out there now are coming about. And, there's also interest now in different drug classes beyond just the usual 5 or 6 panel, right? I think that, and rightfully so, things like even the 8 or 9 panel where people were testing for things like propoxyphene and methaqualone, get those out of your policy. I mean, methaqualone is not even available anymore. It's not even found in any drug test. Propoxyphene is the same thing. So people that have those things in their policy, you really need to look at them, get with the times and start looking at things like oxycodone and the opioids and some of the other drugs that are out there. We're hearing people asking questions about different forms of THC. The Delta 8, the Delta 10s. You can't really include them right now in your standard panel, but you need to sort of be aware of them. We have customers asking about things like kratom and psilocybin, which is mushrooms, magic mushrooms, and fentanyl. And all these things are going to start becoming more and more part of future programs. HHS is even looking at including fentanyl into future regulated panels, right? So I think, the whole bottom line is that times they are a-changing, Bill, right? Like, was it Bob Dylan that had that song? I think you wrote about that in one of your papers. And so from a method standpoint, things are changing. Oral fluid is kind of leading the way, but others will kind of come along. New forms of drugs, I think, are going to need to be included in programs. Policies are going to need to be updated, and people need to stay on top of their programs. It's kind of you might look at it as challenging, but at the same time, it's kind of an exciting time for substance abuse programs and people just kind of keeping on top of those to make sure they're doing the right things for their companies and their employees.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, we do a industry survey every year. We ask questions about which drug testing methods do you offer, which ones are you considering offering. This is a survey of drug testing providers. And the very first survey that I conducted, I started the Current Consulting Group in 1998. In 1999, I did the first drug testing industry survey. Didn't realize it was going to be the first of 26 drug testing annual surveys. But in that first survey, there were just 4 questions. In the future, who will buy drug testing and how will they buy it? And who will sell drug testing and how will they sell it? And the results were really interesting. I gave that presentation as the final workshop on the final day of the SAPA conference in Southern California that year. Expected nobody to be in the session, right? It's 4:00 on a Friday. Everybody wants to get out of there and get home. And the room was packed. Everybody wanted to know what the survey results were. And so we've done it every year since then. And when we ask questions about the future of drug testing now, we get some very interesting responses. I would invite our audience to go to our website and look up the articles that we wrote, the executive summary that we wrote for our 2024 drug testing industry survey There's some very interesting information in there from people in the business who are looking to the future and trying to figure out, how do we stay relevant? How do we continue to offer solutions to our clients that help them solve the problems that they're faced with? And when it comes to drug testing, in this day and age, as I mentioned earlier, with the legalization of marijuana, with a really, a lot of strain on the economy and markets where hiring people is getting harder and harder to do and to fill positions, alternative drug testing methods like oral fluid testing, maybe even rapid hair testing, the impairment exams like Brian was talking about with gays and others, that rapid oral fluid testing from Buzzkill, which is very unique and different than others. And of course, Premier Biotech's rapid oral fluid testing products, which are year after year recognized as the number one recognized brand in rapid oral fluid testing. These are all having a big impact on how the future of the drug testing industry and the drug testing markets look. So great information, Brian. Anything else to add?
No, I don't think so, Bill. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and looking forward to just getting our podcasts out there and getting some good readership on this, and getting questions from people. So don't hesitate to let us know if you have questions or thoughts, or you need some help trying to interpret some of this, or help with your programs.
Yeah, visit us at currentconsultinggroup.com. Email us at info@currentconsultinggroup.com. Find our past episodes of Currently Speaking at the website. Follow us on all the popular, commonly used podcast platforms. Share, follow, like, and help us grow our readership, as Brian says, so that more and more people can find this great information. Brian, thank you once again for a great episode, and we wish everybody a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.